Thank you. Oh, here we go. Hey, Joanne. Are other people coming? Okay. So I'll just sit since they're so small. So I was working on a project, and I can't even remember what I was working on, and I came across these videos by Pastor Lenny Duncan, and he was actually a pastor in Vancouver for a time, and now he's gone back for more education. And but he had made these videos a few years ago, so I thought it would be interesting for us to see this and talk about it, and Juan Carlos will be coming on the 17th to talk about, any questions that we have concerning the Oregon Synod, the ELCA, about these concerns. I don't expect us to solve any problems, of course. It's just the start of a discussion. So I wanted to start with a question, because Pastor Duncan was part of a group a few years ago called Decolonize Lutheranism. The last year I saw anything for it was from 2018, and it looks like the group was flailing back then for whatever reason, and hopefully they'll get it going again. I mean, that was before COVID, so but there's a lot of good stuff on the website. So I thought this quote was really interesting, and I thought maybe we could discuss it in small groups or just two tables. Yeah. People in power in our church are part of a dominant cultural group that wields the power to establish and maintain cultural norms. These cultural norms define what it means to be Lutheran. This dominant culture is one of European American heritage, of Lutheranism brought over mostly from Germany and Scandinavia, but this is not the full picture of what Lutheranism is locally and globally. The funny thing is that my dad's last name is Jensen, and so I always get, oh, that's a good Scandinavian name, and turns out my dad wasn't the Lutheran, my mom was. My dad was actually raised Mormon, and his family came over from the Scandinavian countries as Mormons. So, so my mom, who's Irish, British, and Welsh, converted Dad, well, not really, he did it himself, but to Lutheranism. He would not be happy if I said that she converted him. So, that's right, that's right. Okay, so let's take about 5 minutes in our small groups and discuss this question.
So is it possible we need to give up something or change?
Yeah, is it possible that we need to give up something or change something to extend the welcome of the ELCA? That's the question. Thank you, Lori. Okay, so shall we come back together? And was there anything that came up for you that was interesting or stood out to you that you'd like to share with the group?
It struck me that this is an affirmation and a continuation of the attitude that we have. Are we taping it? Is this why we need the mic? Yes. Yeah. We are, okay. Because otherwise I can just shout, you know. This is an affirmation of, unfortunately, the colonizer mindset, which basically states, and stated in writing from a prior pope, that if you are white and European, you own the entire world. And so you can carve it up however you like. And if there's somebody there, they're not really people anyway, so it's okay. You can get rid of them. So this just affirms that, I think. And those of us who are white and European benefit from that, and so perpetuate it.
I was telling our table that our son came up. He's a pastor in Northern California, and he's a pastor of a non-liturgical church, because their traditional worship is more liturgical. But so we went when he preached at a church on Allen here in Beaverton, and we went in. And I was just amazed at the diversity in that church. All stripes and colors, and I thought, I bet a lot of these people drive past St. Andrew to get to this church. And so we were talking about liturgical versus non-liturgical worship, and you know, what appeals to who. And Bonnie had a good point, but I don't remember it, so I'm going to hand her the mic.
Put you on the spot.
You're talking about we're all the same body of Christ.
Oh, okay. Well, I was not raised Lutheran. I married it. And I really do appreciate the liturgy. I don't think, I want this to sound okay, but I don't think I relate to it like somebody who's been raised in it. I don't think I have the complete understanding. But I was raised in a church, well, I shouldn't say that, because I've been to many different aspects. I've been in a more fundamentalist, but I was also spent a good part of my time within a diverse, black-led evangelical church. And I really think that we just need to learn to accept people for who they are, not, and critical is too hard of a word, but say that, you know, we just have to accept that sometimes culture enhances us. And I personally really miss diversity. I taught in Portland Public Schools in North and Northeast Portland my entire career, which is why I came this color at the early age. But I appreciate and I love and I truly miss diversity. And we just need to learn to accept it, not be critical of it, not to say, can't handle, you know, words on the wall. What difference does it make, you know? But that's my point. And there was a time when our church, remember with Pastor Brocker, through his association with the organization in Portland, where I can't remember the man's, Reverend Hayes, I believe his name is. He was with EMO. Huh? Haynes, there you go. We did an exchange between the church bodies where we attended a service between each other, which was located at Maranatha Church in Northeast 13th of Skidmore, which is where I went a lot as a teenager in high school. That was my association. And they came here and did a service, and we actually, I don't know if we broke bread here, but we broke bread there and just had a wonderful discussion. I missed that.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, it is, and Pastor Duncan will tell us this, we are the whitest church in the United States, even above Missouri Synod Lutheran. So I'm not sure what our overall synod is, how we need to talk about change, I think. So I'm going to start the video. Let me let me know if you can hear the sound.
Originally, when I was going to do this is an independent study for school. This is how I do school, y'all. It was going to be an independent study, and it was going to be a really kind of antiseptic paper I was going to write, hopefully to seek publication in Lutheran Quarterly or something like that, where I was just going to take our statements on diversity and where the money went. I just didn't want to write a paper that 5 white PhDs were going to read and scoff at.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to try to put the subtitles on. Okay, there we go. The sound is a challenge right now, so wait a minute. There we go.
It was going to be a really kind of antiseptic paper I was going to write, hopefully to seek publication in Lutheran Quarterly or something like that, where I was just going to take our statements on diversity and where the money went. I just didn't want to write a paper that 5 white PhDs were going to read and scoff at. Do Black Churches Matter in the ELCA is an exploration of what the church has historically done to black bodies who have served it and been a part of it. It's an exploration of why we can't seem to do diversity well, why we can't seem to listen to the prophetic witness of Black Lutheranism, and what gifts it has for white Protestantism today. In particular, there's a super problematic history in the Lutheran Church. You can start with Muhlenberg diming out a slave girl on his way up to Philadelphia, and you can go all the way to the way Jehu Jones was treated by the Pennsylvania Ministerium, and then you can just look around your own neighborhood at churches that are these bastions of whiteness surrounded by black neighborhoods. I feel like the prophetic witness of Black Lutheranism is the only hope for the ELCA going forward. We talk about less members, we talk about how we're not in the center of society anymore, we talk about how no one really listens to us, we talk about how we have less funds, we talk about how we have less resources. Well, Black Lutherans have been dealing with that since day one because the systems of our church have placed them there. And I don't believe it's intentional. White supremacy is a culture that people are born, they're baptized into it like a believer's baptism in another tradition. And when they come up from it, they're so steeped in it, they don't even realize what they're doing. In the course of doing that, as I explored different things, I realized that this story was too important. When I ask you the question, do Black churches matter in the evangelical Lutheran Church in America, you have two very visceral answers. And depending on what kind of answer comes to your mind automatically when I ask you that question, it really depends on how you're going to see this movie. Some people will hear that question and say, no, they don't matter. The systems that are in place don't support them, that people are being crushed, that the story of Black Lutheranism is littered with bodies of our elders, all the way down to Jehu Jones. And then there's some people who will hear that question and say, yes, the prophetic witness of Black Lutheranism is so important for the evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And so my hope for this movie is to start to bridge the gap and close that distance between those two answers. So from 1834 to 1840, as far as we can tell, this is just a record we have. We don't know for sure if this is true. I mean, right. This is the whole research part of it, right?
Exactly.
But as far as we can tell, Jehu Jones was never paid.
Right.
black churches matter in the ELCA?
That's a tough question to answer.
That's a hard question to answer as a yes or a no.
I think if you would hear it spoken, the words would be yes.
I think that black churches have great importance, are very important to the ELCA.
If you would judge me by my actions, my words would be no.
No, I don't really believe it at all. I don't believe the ELCA's commitment to it.
In some ways, they matter a lot, but in some ways, they matter very little.
But as a whole, I would say no.
I don't feel, let me say, a commitment from the ELCA to black congregations.
Yehu Jones was one of the earliest African-American pastors in the Lutheran tradition, ordained and a member of the Ministerium of New York, who at one point, with his family, moved to Philadelphia. And so within this, it's a very interesting insight into the work that he was doing, the day-to-day work that he was doing as a Lutheran pastor. Since I left you, meaning the ministerium gathering, said I have visited 2,781 family, 163 of which were to be the sick. He said nothing around to excite the feelings from then. It was about when I had visited a house where gathered the most criminal debauchery that I have ever seen. He said, very much with their sinful and degrading condition.
So he was going to like the places no other pastor would go, basically.
Which he called colored people of all descriptions. What he also does towards the very end is he inserts a sentence, oh, by the way, I haven't been paid yet. They acknowledged these letters, that they received them, and the fact that we have them in the collection meant that they did receive them and were retained. They didn't discard them, they held on to them. But he's been in this ministry from at least 1833, and now we're getting close to 1840. And he's still writing letters, seeking financial support for his work.
We could talk about the many decisions that have been made that says that we as a church want to be more diverse. For me, they tell me your actions speak louder than words. So we have a whole lot of words on paper. I would encourage us to put those words into action, to do what we say we're going to do. Currently, we have 17 congregations that have disbanded within the city. And we have one Latino ministry that remains. And we have 2 African descent established congregations that have remained. And I have all the memorials and resolutions and social statements and all of that. They look good, they look great. I think institutional racism plays a large part in it. I mean, for me, I'm continually struggling with internalized oppression and what that looks like. And so I'm acutely aware of overt and covert racism within our institution, which says to me, it looks good on paper, but I'd rather see your actions. In the words of Langston Hughes, live your creed.
Apart from race has been a part that you have to deal with, especially when you're black or Hispanic, Latino, whatever. You carry that with you, and people see that if it's from your accent or from your skin color, whatever, they see that, and you have to work along with that. I think the work of the ministry, it takes commitment. the church is going to have to commit. The national, the synod, all of us have to commit. We're going to keep this ministry open. We're not going to get a lot of money out of this ministry. That's what we're expecting. It's probably not going to be self-supporting for a number of years. But we're going to hang in there, and we're going to work with this congregation because we see there's some work, some great work, good work that's being done in that part of the city.
For me, the investment has decreased. We'll take into consideration the number of African descent and African nationals and Latino leaders and the investments that have been made into this particular group. If we say we want to be more diverse, we need to invest in our leaders.
So then I have to ask you the question I've been asking everyone. Do black churches matter in the evangelical Lutheran Church in America?
At this point in time, I truly have to say, for the most part, I don't think so. I believe that there are plenty of people in this church who really care about the black community, about churches in the urban area, about doing ministry with people who are in poverty. But as a whole, I would say no. The gap is we are talking the talk and not walking the walk. Obviously, as a church, we are not living out who we say we are.
CCLP for me was a time of fun and fellowship. Really came into this as a child, so a member of Holy Cross, 9th and Lehigh, North Philly, came in through a Holy Communion class, actually in the midst of a transitioning community. So we were the first African Americans on the block where my mom currently still lives. And so our first introduction was the white pastor and the white intern coming, knocking on the door, inviting us to camp, to VBS. Come, participate. And so that kind of was the intro. So it was children first. And so we came, and then actually, as we got involved in the church, and then our parents came. And so I have to say our, because I have 8 siblings. And so there are 9 African-American children now in this German Lutheran congregation that is now reaching out to this community that's transitioning. The emphasis, the focus, and the investment, and I have to highlight investment because there was a financial investment into these communities that were transitioning. And so the investment was in children. There was Sepsi Day and Unity Day and all of these days, Sports Day, all of those events were meant to bring children from the city together to help build relationship and help to build social skills. And so I think that was important and an important investment.
We will see the end of our raise up, a better for the nations. The Lord has made a proclamation.
The desire of the Lutheran Church is to create a template which is essentially suburban, posited on growth in numbers and growth in income, and that self-sustaining in 5 years or 7 years. It does not work in the city. There's this constant pressure, to go on your own, go independent, and go be self-sustaining. No, the most important thing is not to become self-sustaining, but to take care of these people. If you wanted to have a more diverse church, you have to put the money where the diversity is.
That was the LCA's response to the civil rights era and some of the problems that were happening in the inner city.
Yep.
And then in 1986 or 87 the ELCA is formed.
87.
87, and right after that, that money went.
It went south, yeah.
And the funny thing is that now we're trying to get a foothold back in the cities as things are changing.
Yeah. Good luck.
All the congregations in the city, because it's the city, and the problems, the issues and so forth that are endemic to city living and so forth, and trying to maintain a congregation in the city, I'm not quite sure that the church has its focus on that.
And of course, always, I'm not going to say people on the margins, but people in the margins, who we have opportunity to walk with and to accompany on this journey. I haven't really seen that played out. I'm challenged because I'm in the city for good. It's not a button I wear, it's not a program that I participate in, it's the life I live. And so therefore, as I walk with my colleagues, and I understand that my colleagues are paid below salary guidelines. My colleagues don't have insurance. My colleagues are challenged in that they've been in this church for many years, but don't have pensions, and so they have to continue to work in this church. And you say, well, why don't they have pensions? Well, their pensions are so meager that they can't afford to retire, so therefore they have to continue to work. Why? Because their salaries have always been below guidelines. And so they have not been able to accumulate, like our other brothers and sisters, the monies, resources necessary to be able to retire at what we would call a reasonable age.
It's not a question of the rhetoric, it's the question of doing it. And we're stuck at the rhetoric. And there's nothing happening, and nobody notices.
The churches that matter in the ELCA are the churches that can be financially sustainable. The churches that are not financially sustainable are allowed to just, through benign neglect, just fade away.
I think the prophetic witness, I mean, number one, we're here. I'm here because I believe in the Lutheran theology, you know, and I think that's what drew me, and that's what keeps me. Because often, you know, you receive the question, why are you in that white church? You know, and I said, because the Spirit drew me here and God has called me here, so I remain here, because if nothing else, I have a presence. I have a presence, and I have come to learn that the prophetic piece for me is to speak truth to power.
In this country, we seem to have become what I call Christian capitalists.
So I'm going to speak my truth, and I'm freed up to be able to speak that truth again as I come to understand my own internalized oppression, the microaggressions against my soul that have really happened as a result of remaining in this institution. But my awakening comes as I understand the impact of chattel slavery and how it continues now in the mindset of the predominant culture. That's why I said it looks good on paper, but I'd rather see your actions.
If you combine the propensity for rhetoric with the absence of action, what do you get? A lot of mouth, no action.
We operate on what I would call a fiscal Darwinistic type of a model in which we affirm the strong congregations that can actually afford to pay some money to mission support and to help participate in the building of the larger church. But those churches that cannot sustain themselves and can't contribute, the only thing we can seem to offer them is encouragement to make bricks without straw kind of a thing. There seems to be no investment on the part of the ELCA in urban cities.
First things first, a redistribution of wealth.
And then I switched to Liberty Mutual and saved hundreds. I know, exactly.
So,
Well, I think prayer is always a good thing.
okay. We'll watch that one next time. So, I figured this would be a good time to break up into small groups again and talk about what came up for you when you saw the video and what really stood out, what questions, what concerns do you have. So we'll do that for 5 minutes in small groups, and then we'll talk in a larger group. Okay, are we ready to come back together? Shall we come back together? We're getting good conversations, it looks like. So what came up for you guys, and what thoughts do you have about what you saw? Yeah, you had a really good discussion over there.
So I think one thing our table talked about was it was striking to hear the African-American pastor who said that people knocked on my door and invited us to join the church, and we grew, and now look where she is, look how she ended up spending her life. And I was connecting that to Earth Camp, where it feels like it's one time per year where we really have this large influx of people who are happy to come and join the church and participate in this activity that we lead. And I know that it feels like there's an opportunity for more people to attend than currently do attend. And if we want to address the challenge of how do we build connections to the church, there's no better time to do it than when you're talking to children and working with children who will remember that, and you really can impact their lives in a way that it's harder to do with grown-ups. So it just kind of refocused for me. I know that Earth Camp is it's a big effort for our church to do, but it might be worth talking more about how can we put more resources into that type of activity where potentially we see some success in ways that we don't otherwise see.
Thank you, Tim.
But to that point, it discourages me to see the parents of the kids in our youth group not attending church. They're parked outside to pick their kids up after their Sunday school class, but they're not here. The parents don't seem to be participating. So it looks like if we got the kid, we would grow, but I'm concerned about parents.
During the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it coincided in part with the pandemic too. So a lot of us were stuck at home, those of us who didn't have to work. As an academic, I read books, and I read many books on racism, but two in particular I read back to back. One was small, one was huge. The book White Fragility and Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning. That was before he made the short version of it. I came away feeling kind of negative about the White Fragility book. Not because I thought she was wrong, but I don't think we're going to go to sensitivity groups and sensitize ourselves out of racism. It might be a good thing, we should maybe do it, but I don't think it's the answer. Ibram Kendi came at it from a different point of view. He argued, and I'm working from memory here, right at the very beginning, the whole problem does not begin in the first instance with racism. That's where it ends up after discrimination and the way you allocate resources, et cetera, et cetera. And it caused me to think back to the 1960s, which almost everybody in here can remember. We didn't make whatever progress we made then, and we can debate that. We didn't make it because we all got in groups and talked about our white fragility. The changes started at lunch counters, buses, in very concrete ways. And then it moved to voting rights, and you can go right, concrete things. It caused me to think that the way our hearts change is not because we get in a circle and we talk about it, but we have to, over time, come to terms with changed objective things. And our attitudes change in response to that. That you cannot refuse service to somebody because of their skin color. Now we add to that because of your sexuality or orientation or all the issues there, and it's being debated in the courts right now. Can you refuse to a gay couple to make a wedding cake? In other words, our feelings change in response to concrete things rather than the other way around. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but
yeah, it's like what that one pastor was saying about actions. I want to see your actions. Yeah.
When Don was on internship in I believe it was 1967, he was sent to Washington, D.C. And he was in Grace Lutheran Church in Washington, D.C., which is on 16th and Varnum. The next year were all the riots on 14th. And Grace Lutheran is surrounded by the black community, yet it was predominantly white. There were a couple of individuals or families of the black community, but that was it. And Don, for Vacation Bible School, took our car and brought people from the lower income areas, which were all black kids, into the church for Vacation Bible School. That was a very tough time for the congregation.
There's so much, like you say. But it does seem like addressing this question about change in the ELCA. This video helped me to think broadly about the big church and resources, and that maybe a value that we have in church, which is to put our money where the money is needed. Maybe that is really the need for the whole church, is to think about where is the ministry needed, and not necessarily expecting churches to be self-supporting ever, but that there's a mission there.
Lori, say something about that post that you did about churches giving their property back to the community.
Yes, yeah. So an example of creative justice is very recently the Future Generations Collaborative, which is a non-profit Native Americans group, worked with some folks at my old church, Westminster, and they, over the course of 2.5 years, finally, just last month, gave back. There's empty church buildings sitting around that cost money to maintain. This church had been not meeting for over a decade. The facility was being used a little bit by folks, but it's in Laurelhurst Park, if you know where that is. And what's come now is they gave the money, or they gave the church building and property to this Native American group. And it's intended to be tiny homes for houseless Native American people, and it will have on it child care center, child well-being. So there's like community services as part of it. So it is like one drop in the bucket, but then you think about, well, how many empty church buildings and properties are there around? And so that's a great example of using the resources to address this.
Yeah, and that one is called Barbie's Village, and it's not Barbie because of the Barbie doll. I just want to put that out there. It's Barbie because that's a woman's name, and that's to honor her and her legacy. And her husband's name was Ken. How much better can you get than that? But anyway, that's why it's named what it's named. Anyways, it's a terrific thing y'all did there, and I've seen this video before, so thank you for bringing it to us. And you know that we all give money to our church, and part of the money from our church, the benevolence portion, goes back to the ELCA. Bonk, there it is. And that's 8.5% for our church. And some churches do not give that much. Some churches give much less than that. And so I'm on Synod Council now, so I'm learning things. And part of our role on Synod Council, and it may not be me because I'm quite an introvert, is to go out and speak to people at other churches who are giving less than the 8.5%, and to give them reasons to maybe up that benevolence from their church. If they can afford it, it's all about the money and who can afford what, but it's priorities too. I know that the Lutheran Church does plant churches, and most people think that that's a non-denominational thing, but we plant churches too. And we do. We give them, like, here you go, 5 years, make it work or leave. And that's not going to work everywhere. And someone I know went to plant a church in Bend, and I don't know if she's self-sufficient yet. But are we going to, take the rug out from under her or not? And apparently, we take the rug out from inner city churches of racial minorities more frequently than we do suburban ones, because we have the money. But shouldn't some of our money be directed there? It's kind of like everybody gives to charities for whatever reason. You give it, and you give it because you want that thing to grow wherever it is. And shouldn't some of our money be looked at that way instead of just to new lights, new carpet, things like that? Shouldn't some of our money that we give to the Synod be in that realm where, yes, we need to support you, and we'll continue to do it by this percentage or whatever? And it seems that we're not doing that. We're not living up to what Live Our Creed is. So I'm learning more and more about that in my new role, but I hope to hopefully be impactful in that. I don't know how much I can as a member at large, but I am learning at this point, and hopefully can do more. So there you go.
Thanks. Thank you, Jan. I didn't know that. That's good to know. And I'm sure you will make an impact. Did you have a question or a comment? Okay, sorry.
I just want to say a quick thing, India, about the statement up there where it said, because they couldn't interpret it properly, to my mind, it said that the problem with at the root of some of this is that Christian Catholicism is an issue. What it didn't, I'm sure they meant Christian capitalism. And that's a huge, huge thing. And that's the elephant in the room that we're all talking about, is that if the church is going to be financially stable, it can't be a functioning church unless it's financially stable. Since when did the church identify itself as a capitalist or as a business model for what Jesus